18, go ahead.
All right, we have shots fired red, shots fired blue as well. We have one officer down. We got him back behind cover. At this point, I got a 4-man front set up, facing north. If you guys in the Bearcat are up on the road, have them come south to our location. And we're up on thermal right now. This guy's not moving. He's down.
How copy?
Copy. Suspect in custody, 10-7.
Yeah, static buzz, frequencies clear. Brand squads like the danger is near. Radio waves cut through the night. Tactical moves, we strike with might. Reach the door, flesh and clear. Echoes loud in your ear. Coordinates set, we move as one. Missions hot, the battle's won. Yeah, radio red. We on the air, signal strong. We're everywhere. The hype is live, friend don't stop. We strategize. Check your 6, the shadows creep. Solid steps, we never sleep. Call the shots, the team's in sync. Radio crack. We're on the brink, Breach the door, flashing clear, echoes loud in your ear, coordinates set, we move as one. Missions hop, the battle's won. Radio red, we on the air, signal strong. We're everywhere, technical sound. The hype is live, rain don't stop. We strategize.
What's going on, everyone? So that was just a bunch more clips from trainings that we've done, like sharing that with you guys. Man, I will tell you, we almost didn't make it tonight. I had a call out right before this, just made it home in time and jumped on here. Sunday night, Rich was supposed to be with us. He had a call out. He didn't make it, obviously. We had Danny fill in for him. But that is just life in a specialized division of law enforcement. Call outs just are part of it. But we made it here. We're in here tonight. Welcome to the Tactical Comms Lives. Just to let everyone know, this is the launch of a multi-part series dedicated to the one skill that can make or break every mission: communication under pressure. We're locking in Wednesday or Thursday nights, depending on our schedules, because those can fluctuate. And it's going to be to go deep into real world comms issues that affect tactical teams, medics, canine handlers, rope techs, air assets, and even ham-based MCOM operators. So here's what's going to be coming over the next couple episodes. We're going to be getting into things like why comms fail when you need them most, how comms breakdowns can derail tactical medical operations, some comms philosophy, also SWAT and canine, just law enforcement, special operations units, specifics comms issues, what works, what doesn't, which will also be really relevant to a lot of the, just prepared mindset people. Considerations with comms during technical rope operations, air asset specific operations, and then the ham and MCOM stuff, as well as some drills to instill in your planning and maybe even some gear setups and breakdowns. And the goal here is really to give some field proven, scenario driven, no BS, critical thinking and conversation for anyone who wants to perform when it counts. And this is just all part of this channel's expansion. Sunday nights, we're going to keep going as well, but that will feature a separate live series focused on other operational topics, things like tactics, gear, mindset, and whatever else comes up. And we'll still be putting out our normal videos in amongst all of that. We're trying to build something serious here and turn this channel into something real. So with that said, please help the channel. Please share the videos, subscribe to it, leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you ever get the chance, check out our in-person trainings and show up and train with us, because we really like the face-to-face and getting to know you guys, because this is going to get really, really good. And tonight, of course, we have instructor, operator, medic, and professional, Taylor, why is my radio doing this guy? Rich. So before we get into this, I just wanted to say real quick, I see CUCV Farmer from the People's Republic of Michigan. Welcome. I hope you enjoy the live. Of course, Terminal Element, he's here. What's up, dude? What's going on? Hope to see some more people in the chat as well. As you guys go through, again, the point of us doing the lives is to get real-time interaction. So if you leave a comment, do whatever, we will surely respond to you, acknowledge it, and say what's up, and hopefully give you any information if you need it or you ask for it. So Rich, kick us off here, because really the whole idea for this series was born because of conversations you and I were having, a lot of going back and forth on what was going on in Venezuela. And I think it's really important to note here, because we say all the time, comms is king. And what did we do in Venezuela to almost mess up the enemy? If you were looking at their notes, one of the first things they did was they targeted Venezuelan communications antennas, because we know that if you have the ability to disable the enemy comms, it's basically step one in a high risk raid. And that comms denial can really shape the first 10 minutes of an operation. And they did this with these RQ-170 Wraith stealth drones. And they created a digital blackout over Caracas, which neutralized the Venezuelan comms grid and all of their encrypted channels. And all of this, we know there are significant comms challenges in dense urban terrain. And this was in Caracas. So we know that is dense urban terrain. Plus, the mission used the MH-47G Chinooks, the MH-60M Blackhawks, and the AH-6 Little Birds for insertion, overwatch, extraction. So we know that operation required tight coordination between JSOC, aviation, and the EW assets.
It wasn't just that. I mean, I've been watching this for about, 5 months now. And you mentioned the RQ drones. I mean, this was full package with everything. Our entire, what do we call it? Department of War now, plus our Space Force, plus Cybercom. It's everything coming together, and it's super incredible to watch. I watched my guy Monkey Works and my guy Max Afterburner, and as these things have been coming along, I kind of predicted it, right? Because you see us down there with our aircraft, testing their air defenses, seeing what radar is turning on, basically doing a digital map of their entire country of what radio signals they have, what air defenses they have. And we took it, about 35 minutes, I think the operation took. Absolutely incredible.
Well, and with the comm stuff, given the scale of the operation, you had 150 plus aircraft involved. Long range comms are essential. So you probably had SAT comms as the backbone of any sort of multi-theater coordination effort.
No, absolutely. I can't imagine. I mean, 150 aircraft launching from aircraft carriers and several different bases. The logistics involved with that is beyond me. That's incredible how it happened.
So getting right into this, most operations, or let's say most rescues don't fail because of medicine. They don't fail because of rope work. They fail because someone just assumed that their radio would work. We all assume that our radio is going to work. And tonight we're going to be talking about the most fragile part of any tactical or medical operation, communications. The thing that everyone depends on, and it's also the thing that no one thinks about until it's gone. And if you've ever been on a scene where radios start dropping out, batteries die, channels are getting stepped on, or someone just forgets their radio discipline, you already know how fast a clean operation can just turn into chaos. So the goal for tonight is to break down why comms fail, why people fail comms, and why the human brain is often the biggest point of failure in the entire system. Now, Rich, let me ask you this. Why do you think it is that people just seem to assume that their radio is always going to work?
Because on normal day-to-day operations, right, EMS call to EMS call, or walls in patrol, normal call to call, your radio works. You never really have to worry about it. The times you have to worry about it are when things step out of the norm and you're in some abnormal situation that I'm not going to say your radio wasn't designed for, but maybe your network wasn't planned for that. We didn't know about that specific dead spot. If we're talking about like a repeater network.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the guys, your non-comm guys, and all the comm guys who are watching this will probably agree with this. People almost treat radios like they're like magic boxes. They just think that you turn the thing on and it works. And all it takes is for you to get into a basement, get behind a concrete wall, go under a metal staircase, and all of a sudden, you got dudes holding their radio sideways like it's a TV antenna from 1987 as they're sitting there, yelling, "Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?" And what they're missing is simple. The why is because physics. Physics is why. That's why it's not working. So, Rich, let's talk about why for as much as these things cost. Right now we're on the APX series everybody's using. I have a 7000 and 8000. I think we're on the NXT radios. For as much as these things cost, why radios do in fact fail. And I think the key here is that they fail for predictable reasons.
Well, I was around. I've been a cop for a while. I was around for one of our changeovers with our radio systems from P25 phase 1 to P25 phase 2, and that required us to kind of redo everything. And in the beginning, it was a bit rough. Like, we had to go around. I was in patrol at the time, and we had to go around and report outages because there were outages everywhere. Because with that repeater network, as big as our city is, it just about covers everything, but we had to go map out the areas it didn't, right? We only learned it didn't work there when we were on job and it didn't work there. So we'd report that so they could like amp up the signal strength in that area or whatever they have to do.
Sure. Well, I've been through, when I came out, we were actually issued Vertex standard radio, surprisingly enough. And then we went to the XTS 5000s, and that was on an 800 megahertz system. And now we're on to this 700 megahertz digitally encrypted system, which is statewide. But to the same thing, they were trying to find all the dead spots. And I think that the predictable reasons, though, that if you have 5 minutes of using a radio, you understand terrain, buildings, bad antennas, dead batteries, just being on the wrong channel. Encryption mismatches, because everybody's going to encryption now, and it only takes one character to be off for it to not link up. Human error and panic are some of the biggest predictable factors as to why these things are going to fail.
And especially with these 700, 800 megahertz digital radios, they work perfectly or they don't at all. With VHF and UHF, old school stuff, you start fading out a little bit, getting a little bit fuzzy. There's none of that. It works or it doesn't work, and people don't quite understand that.
You're either all in or you got nothing. No, and that's why as far as rant goes, when I've done videos in the past on those, I explain to people, we kind of all decided on sticking to a UHF platform because we can take it with us. We have the repeater infrastructure that we can set up and take down as we need. It's a really reliable system because it is so simple, even though we're using P25 over those networks, or we're using DMR and we have encryption on them, but it's still, the base of it is still a UHF system. But let's talk about the last one that I mentioned. I mentioned panic, because panic is a comms killer that people really don't think about.
Well, I guess I'm not going to say communications in general, like talking, but actually manipulating your radio, right? It's a complex little machine. It's kind of difficult to do when you're in a high stress environment, right? So I'm not going to dig on my guys at all, but just something as simple as when you accidentally turn a scan feature on and your radio starts beeping at you, knowing how to turn it off, So
Sure.
if you think about something like switching frequencies or switching from duplex to a simplex frequency in order to communicate, that's going to be kind of difficult to do when that panic response, or not the panic response, I'm sorry, that stress response comes in.
Well, the panic response, though, how many people, and chat, if you guys are in any sort of emergency services, how many of your guys have accidentally hit the emergency button and they freak out as soon as it happens and they have no idea how to turn it off? You can see the panic just go over their face because they just put a signal out across the entire agency that there's an emergency here, and there's not. It was just an accident, but they freak out as opposed to just being calm and resetting it. And I think right along with that, just think of an exterior stressor affects people. People, they start, mashing the push to talk button like they're trying to win a carnival game, or they're screaming into the mic, or they're talking and they're calling for help and they forget to let go of the mic, or they forget to breathe. And then you kind of get that classic, static noise. I need static noise, help, static noise. And you're like, well, cool. Where are you? Who are you? Why are you calling? And what's happening?
No, absolutely. I'm smiling the whole time because I see it happen often, because listening to all the radios in the city, pretty much, you hear all the new guys on the radio, with their panicked little calls for service when they hear gunshots a mile away,
As soon as you put someone, as soon as you start inducing the littlest bit of stress, you can make it happen, and it's predictable, and that's kind of why we're getting into that. But I think one of the other big things here is the fact that there's also an assumption, as you mentioned, these, digitally 700 megahertz, 800 megahertz radios, they also assume that they'll have coverage.
No, that's not true. Yeah.
And I think that leads to panic, because when they don't have coverage anymore, it really causes them to freak out.
So with our radios, it's, living outside the city and I have my radio on me, it's kind of incredible. I barely leave the city limits and my radio is already bonking. It's already no signal. Our coverage area, our repeaters barely cover our service area, and sometimes our operations do leave the city, where you mentioned earlier, you're in a basement, you're behind the wall, you don't have the signal. Then what are you going to do?
And there's another thing. If you saw the Terminal Elements comment there, he was like, we have multi-$1,000 radios and an admin who won't buy replacement batteries or antennas when they get old.
Batteries. Oh my God. Yeah.
Right. And listen, and there's no question about it. The Motorola Smart or Impress batteries are insanely expensive, but you're right. For the cost of the radio, the battery's negligible. Put fresh batteries on the thing. Now, I can't say that for my agency, every single one of us is assigned a personal radio, and then in special operations, we're all assigned a secondary battery for it. So we're pretty well taken care of, but that is a huge issue, especially smaller agencies across the country. Yeah, they get a grant, they spend that initial money to buy the system, but they can't even afford to maintain it and keep it functioning how it should.
And that's kind of how the whole system now nationwide came about, through federal funding. But that doesn't go down to little things like batteries, chargers, additional batteries, geez, we have these giant batteries that when we first got them lasted, it would run your radio for about 20 hours, I think. But end of life this year, which is about 8 years later, they'd run your radio for about 3 hours, you know? And there has to be a system in place to predict that and to replace it before it gets to those points.
Yeah, so kind of like going back, right with what we're talking about here, we said they'll assume they'll have coverage. I think another thing is, and this is what drives me crazy, and I see this with a lot of fire department systems, is that, especially on the EMS units, the higher ups assume that the crew will stay together. And the thing is, that radio is not just going back to dispatch. It is for inter-unit communication. If you and your partner get separated for some reason, you got to be able to talk to each other. So again, it's another assumption that really hinders comms. I think another thing is they'll also assume that they'll know what's happening, and then reality hits. The medic gets separated, the rope team goes below grade, the entry team pushes deeper than they had initially planned, or the casualty winds up in a basement, in a culvert, in a stairwell, or, as we have done in training, we put somebody in an elevator shaft. And then suddenly everybody's radio, especially the person who's there, is nothing more than a brick with a button.
Yeah, and with us having a subway in the city, we kind of prepare for that by having a portable repeater system where it's in a Pelican box. You can either plug it in or it has a bunch of batteries in it, and we can actually deploy that repeater system if we are going, subterranean, just for that reason, because at the time they hadn't established a permanent system yet, but we still have that.
Yeah, this is the myth with radio comms is kind of like the working radio, because it works, and just like we said earlier, until it doesn't. And then when it doesn't, everything just falls apart right behind it really quickly.
So I understand, not to call you a radio nerd or any of, I got to point in the right direction here. The people in the chat, radio nerds. But yeah, we have some really high tech stuff and it's really cool. But I kind of believe in reliancy through redundancy, meaning not some super high speed machine having multiple layers. You have your 800 megahertz, maybe you have a dual band VHF, UHF also. Just having multiple systems you can tap into. Either radio breaks, your phone breaks, whatever. You need a completely separate system.
Well, and that's
part of the PACE method.
And that's perfect. So I think what we're kind of getting to is the real enemy of comms is not terrain, it's not buildings, it's not batteries. The real enemy kind of comes into what we were just alluding to a second ago, is the stress physiology.
Yep. Because most of the time you can get around that. Again, any normal day you can get around a little hiccup in comms. But when you have that body alarm response, which was the term I was looking for earlier, that's when things go downhill, Sure, I've been there, but that's why I'm mentioning it.
For all the EMS providers, it's our norepinephrine response. Under adrenaline, people stop communicating. They start reacting, which I always say, we don't want to ever react. We want to respond to a situation. They start talking too fast. They forget basic radio discipline. They end up stepping on transmissions, or they're sitting there holding the push to talk button while they're forming their thought, and they start screaming instead of communicating. And with these modern day mics, there's almost an assumption made that you know how to talk on a radio before you use them, so they filter out any sound of you screaming to try to block out the background noise. That's how that noise cancellation works. So it makes your screams unintelligible. And then, or other people are talking, and one of the most basic things is they forget to acknowledge that a transmission was received, or at the most basic level, they're literally forgetting to breathe.
Yeah, man, it happens. That's the norepinephrine response, that body alarm response. That's what it does. And whether there's communication or the actions you have to take, it has a major effect,
And
that tunnel vision, right?
yeah, and this is why for anybody that is into, that does this as a profession, or anybody that's just into preparedness in general, this is why comms discipline isn't optional. It literally boils down to a survival skill in and of itself. And the principles of all this are really simple. Just like the last episode, you and I were talking about basic medicine, or Danny and I were. We got into, all the tactical medical stuff is great, but it really boils down to the basics. And comms is the same way. It's just kind of keeping the principles are the same. Short transmissions, clear call signs, one idea per transmission, confirmations on those transmissions, and probably the most important, silence when needed, and brevity over emotion.
Yep.
If we could
Be
all
brief, brother. Be brief. That's what I used to say in Police Academy.
What was it?
Be brief, brother. Be brief. Be brief.
There you go. There you go. And that and
PFU.
And that's the whole thing. It is it's a push to talk, not a push to think. That's the PTT stands for push to talk. So yeah, keeping those in mind, and then especially when we get into a tactical medical environment, as far as the whole yelling is concerned, this is really where clarity saves more lives than volume. The loudest guy is not the person you want in that moment. You want the person who can be the clearest minded, the clearest on the radio, let you guys know, let you know what you need, because you can yell all you want. No one understands you.
Absolutely. But that's kind of hard to teach that, that kind of comes with experience. After lots of hazing, if you were one of those people.
Back in the good old days.
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem here is, and again, I'm gonna reference the chat for this for any insight, because listen, I'm a big gear guy. You're a big gear guy. There's no getting around that. It's just the kind of people that we are. I'm sure a lot of people in the chat are a big gear guy. People train the gear, but they don't train the brain. And as simple as we like to keep comms can become such a complex issue that it is a mental exercise. And if you can't start working through it and keeping yourself calm enough to think under the stress, again, that is the start of their failure points.
And that kind of gets into your the show I missed the other night, your first 60 seconds, right? Mm-hmm. That first minute, that's kind of what determines the whole operation.
Absolutely. And because before we could even, get into the portal repeaters, the brain is going to collapse first. And when it collapses, your comms collapses with it. So now that we're kind of into this, I think it's good. Let's break down the most common reasons teams fail their comms. Not necessarily the comms failing, but if you're on some sort of team, or even just you as an individual, why they fail comms.
One example I can think of is from a very long time ago, which was me. I was the culprit. I was a communications guy. Search and rescue, a Sorex. Weather turned on us. Rainy, icy. We were completely fine. But as the comms guy, this is dumb, but I shoved our big brick radio into my pouch at the time, touched some random buttons on it, which changed frequencies. And I had no idea, because somebody just gave me the radio. They said, hey, here's your radio, use this. I didn't know. So we were completely fine, but there ended up being a whole search and rescue operation to look for us, even though we were warm and dry the entire time. I wasn't familiar with the equipment. Somebody just handed it to me.
That's fantastic, because I think there is a lot of them. Listen, I've been to federal depots, warehouses, emergency response centers, just like you have. And there is no shortage of gear in this country. If the worst happens and there are items that are needed and technology that is needed, we are stocked. We are well prepared to handle that. I think, just to your point, the number one problem is there's no, not necessarily for the agency itself, but maybe for the players involved, there's no pre-mission comms plan. To your point, people show up, they grab radios, they turn them on, and that's the entire plan. Because insert, federal agency acronym here, they pull up with this Pelican case full of radios, and they're like, yep, we're going to hand these out to everybody, and that's how we'll fix this problem. And the problem is there was no planning and no training beyond that. And then number two, you touched on it already, I would say that there's no redundancy. There is, and to the terminal elements point, one radio, one battery, one channel, which all equates to one point of failure.
No, definitely reliancy through redundancy. So, as even though we may not be too high tech, the federal agencies, I'm not going to name them, but when we're working with certain federal agencies, we just keep it simple. We give them one of our extra radios. They give us one of their extra radios. Now we're redundant, right? We have double redundancy with the radios, and then you add cell phones in there. We have triple redundancy. Even though there might be other ways to do it through programming the radios or whatever. No, here, take one of ours. I'll take one of yours. We know they work. We'll do it.
Well, and the terminal element brings up a good point. He says, there's so many providers that seem to have a mental block when it comes to their comms gear. They'll nerd out on airway, resuscitation studies, etc., but they can't bring themselves to learn how the radio works.
And who nerds out on EMS stuff? Corny. It's all corny. Sorry.
And the thing is, though, I can absolutely relate to that because I see it all the time. And I think here is the thing: when you have somebody that has taken the role of, hey, I'm going to be the comms guy, I'm going to be the communications guy, or like be into it, and you're learning about it, kind of just like we were, dude. Like, you weren't that big into radios, really, but I kind of was like, hey, man, like, here's this. This is really cool. What's that?
I was, though. Listen, never mind. We'll address it later. Okay.
Okay. But it was more the fact of like, dude, here's this program. Here's how we can text on the radio. Here's how we do encryption on the radio. Here's this antenna. And to your point, I think even with Nick and with Danny, we kind of brought those guys into it to show them kind of how cool this really is. Like, a lot of guys, you hand them the radio. Here's the channel for dispatch. Here's the channel for the TAC channel. Here you go. They're like, okay, cool. If they're not shown, for lack of better terms, how cool the radio really is or what it can do or how important of a tool it is, well, then their ignorance is really nobody else's fault except yours, because you didn't put it on yourself to sell it to them.
I can't remember anywhere in EMD school, medic school, fire school, whatever other school that I was ever told how a repeater system works. And that's what we use every single day, And yeah. I think that's that's a critical thing compared to a simplex where you think you're talking directly to another radio. Why is this working when in reality it has to go to another point and then back to you? That's not a part of any program.
It happens all the time. And like, listen, with one of the units that I'm assigned to, we have our normal 7,800 megahertz primary channels, but then there's a lot of times we're switching over to VHF because we're out on the water doing operations. And I had to sell to my guys, like, hey, listen, guys, like this is why we can't put the short antennas on our radios, because we have this responsibility. We need this capability in the radios. These antennas can't do it. These antennas are tuned for this. And once you explain that to them, they're like, oh, dude, that's really cool. That makes so much sense to me. And it's on us to do that for guys.
No, absolutely. And were you going to get into interagency operability or anything like that later in this?
Not that's
I didn't
something
want
you
to
and I have
jump
to
on.
talk about. Yeah, that's jumping way ahead on episode maybe 20 because there's
Well,
a
no,
lot going back
I didn't
here.
want to get into the complicated stuff with it.
Yeah,
Just to call and tack channels that already exist that people don't know about.
sure.
That exist in VHF, UHF, 700 and 800 megahertz. There's a way for all of us to talk that exists out
Well,
there.
and you and I have done that. Like we've actually gone through and have found the nationwide interoperability channels. So anybody that's in the chat, anybody watching this, if you're in any sort of public safety role in your radios, there are two separate banks of channels that all of us could get on and activate and talk to each other across the entire country. And it's amazing how many people don't know that. And then the at terminal element just commented, I can't even get people to carry their radios sometimes. They leave them back in the truck.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Doesn't
super
help much
frustrating.
when some crazy person with a gun is chasing you down the street, even
And your crew
fire EMS, whatever. Yeah.
and whatever else. And we bring up, I do the debrief on Webster, New York. And imagine if that guy didn't have a radio with him. So, yeah, once again, brother, that's kind of just on you to sell the radios to your guys and why it's so important. That's as frustrating as can be. So, I think getting right into here, we kind of talked about, the last thing as far as the no redundancy, the having one radio, one battery, one channel. That's the one point of failure. But beyond that, there is no discipline, and not just no discipline talking on the radio, but no discipline in, well, the radio's big, it's heavy, oh, I forgot my radio strap, whatever. You need to have the discipline to carry the thing all the time. Why? Because that's your job. It's part of the uniform. It's part of what you need to be able to work properly. So that's another big failure point. The other thing too is people talking too much or not enough. To any of the ham guys that are watching this, how many times have you heard that there are too many ham operators that just listen to the repeaters? They're not on there actively talking on them. It goes both ways. Now, in the public safety aspect of this, and it's one of the things I am not a fan of rag chewing on a repeater that drives me absolutely insane. But I think that's something that should be rehearsed in practice is coordinated, concentrated, purposeful talk on repeaters amongst ham operators. So there's not enough of that talk on the repeaters. And then the other thing too is just talking at the wrong time or being on the wrong channel. And
It happens to us too. I mean, not as ham operators, but with our emergency channels, we have 21 different patrol districts. I think we have, probably 15 different radio bands, and just switching over to a different band, and then immediately clicking your mic, not monitoring if something's going on already.
Well, and listen, and this is why, as annoying as they are, when there's a 10-3 on the channel or a priority on the channel, whatever you want to call it, there's the priority tone that's put out. That's there because people don't have good radio discipline to not just switch to a channel and key right up and kind of hear what's going on first before they possibly interrupt something. And with the terminal element, again, to your point, one of the things may be, especially with your agency, and again, this is the whole point of these lives, is the real-time going back and forth. You're saying you can't get your guys to carry radios. Maybe that's because there's no accountability, and maybe that's because they're volunteers. And I was a volunteer at 16, and then I stopped being a volunteer at 21 when I became or 19, when I became a full-time paid firefighter, when I went through that phase, and then I went to FDNY. But that is a huge problem in the volunteer system as a whole, is a lack of accountability. What can you do to a volunteer for not carrying a radio? Most likely nothing at all. At worst, you're going to suspend him. So what? He can't volunteer his time at your firehouse So he's going to go to one of the 5 other firehouses that he's a volunteer at and go volunteer there. There's no teeth in any of the discipline.
The answer is brutal hazing. Brutal hazing. We can't do that anymore.
No, it's not in 2026. But, and right along with that, so not only is there but right along with the no accountability, no one checks their gear anymore. Dude, I it's amazing to me, and you can attest to this, if Nick can attest to this, and you're the same way. You and I, when I was at the fire department, that was one thing. Now, especially, all of my law enforcement gear, dude, I'm adjusting something or changing something or tweaking the position of something once every couple months. And not to mention the daily checks of and the cleans of your firearm, your taser, your radio, like your rifle. It all just plays through. Again, with the maritime unit, with that specialty, checking the cartridges to make sure they're full for our PFDs and whatnot. There's a ton of stuff going on. That's hysterical at terminal element. Yeah. And listen, and here on that note, I just want to put out there, and here's the problem. And Rich, you'll agree with me on this. Just because you're paid, that doesn't make you a professional. And if you guys are volunteer guys and they're going out and they're the ones carrying all the gear they're supposed to, they're being more professional than the guys who are collecting a paycheck. And I give them kudos to that. Because you could go further and say, yeah, no one checks their gear. Fine. You come in, listen, we've all seen lazy EMS providers who don't want to check the monitor, don't want to check the drug bag, and they go on a call and they're missing something and they want to complain about it. And it's like, dude, that's on you. You didn't check your stuff. But not only that, if you are that guy and you do want to check stuff, well then how about checking your partner's gear or checking your team's gear? I can't tell you how many times, and this just happened to me, and I don't know if my guys gonna watch this episode or not, but I was like, hey brother, we're at a detail, and I'm like, dude, I am not the guy to like come down on anybody for anything. However, if you find your gun riding that low on your thigh, like getting close to your knee is annoying, or you're chasing somebody and it ends up at the 12 o'clock position as opposed to staying at the 3 o'clock, here's why. And this is what you can adjust. And I did it in a very friendly, condemning way. But it was like, dude, like, hey man, like, fix yourself. That's not right. Here's what, from experience, how you should be doing that. And he was like, oh yeah, man, it does do that. And
it's a drop holster.
It's a droplet. Yeah, it's a droplet. I'll take care of it. No problem. So it was good. And some of the guys are just looking for that guidance. And anybody out there that has the time on and the experience should be sharing that knowledge.
Share the knowledge as much as you can, as much as it's received, until it's not received anymore.
Yep.
And they're just an asshole. So
in addition to all of those reasons why, the no pre-mission comms plans, the having one battery, no redundancy, one channel, one point of failure, people talking too much or not enough, wrong time, wrong channel. In addition to all that, the no accountability, nobody checking their gear, their partner's gear, their team's gear. How about training with no stress inoculation? A lot of teams out there like to train, especially comms, in perfect conditions. They're in quiet rooms, there's clear channels, there's no adrenaline, it's no chaos. They're like, hey guys, we're going to go over the radio today. Here's how you change a channel. Here's how you do this. Here's how you put it on scan. And that's the extent of it. But real operations are quite different. They're not quiet. They aren't calm. They're not controlled. So if anything, they're loud, chaotic, messy, and unforgiving. And that's when we see everything, the wheels just come off the car. And I think there's a big part of this. People have kind of gotten on board, and especially in our training courses that we do, we do a lot of our training under stress, and people have bought on to, doing tourniquets under stress, shooting under stress, moving under stress, yada, yada, yada. But they're not training comms under stress. And
No, never.
never. And
No.
if you don't have comms, no matter what you do or what you were involved in, what comes after that? Everything at that point is just stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I kind of get into we kind of say like comms are the most fragile part of any tactical or medical operation. They're also the first things to fail and the last thing that a lot of people think about.
Always has been, and always will be. Well, up until now, at least.
We're trying to fix it to be not that always will be, right? And I think the biggest thing here is, and if you have stuck with us and you understand that it's not necessarily always a gear problem, but the human factor, and you're understanding why teams fail comms, then you're starting to become part of ahead of the curve.
And what's next? We got the training stuff down. How should teams be equipped, or how should units be equipped? What are your thoughts on that, as far as redundancy is concerned?
Well, and the biggest thing is, and here's the thing. So, this is where we get into, I think, not so much the teams or the public safety spectrum. We've kind of addressed that with being motivated, learning your stuff. That's on you to kind of master, especially, but in the prepared citizen space. If you're out there and you're using a Baofeng UV5R, you're setting yourself for failure because the gear itself is not designed to withstand any sort of harsh environment.
I feel like we have a lot of future episodes with this. We haven't touched on satellite at all or anything like that.
And that's the point. You're really setting yourself up for failure if you're starting out down that road. And that's why a lot of the videos I do, if I do a review on a radio, guys are like, oh, well, what's your daily driver? And I'm like, no matter what, for lack of a better terms, Chinese radio, I will review or mess with and try to learn how to use. My daily driver is always going to be a Motorola something or other because it's going to withstand the environment that we're operating in.
Yes, they've been tested through hell and back.
Yep.
We know that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that as far as the comms episodes go, we talked about you and I were talking about what tactical medicine is. Danny and I talked about the first 60 seconds. Since we're getting into the comm space of this, I think next week's Wednesday or Thursday's video, whatever we decide, keeping it comms related, we should get into the medic's nightmare scenario and talk about redundancy and talk about austere environments and talk about what happens when you find yourself in that environment, in that position with that responsibility, and you find yourself suddenly alone. Since we just kind of talked about, it is a common thing for guys to not carry a radio, for agencies to only give one radio on an ambulance, so that everybody doesn't have their own, no matter what capacity they're in.
No, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a good place. Again, we're keeping this right around that 45-minute to 1 hour mark. We're there. This is a good place to stop. Guys know what to expect for next week. That's what we're going to be getting into. To everyone that watched, guys, thank you for hanging out with us. I appreciate all the comments you guys left. We like the feedback. We're going to keep this going. On Sunday night, Rich and I are still going back and forth.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is going to be something most likely related to either night vision or situational awareness, something along that line. I'm not sure where we're going to go with it yet. The terminal element just left a comment. That's not a nightmare. That's just fun. Well, you're one of those sick medics that enjoys all that. But we're going to get into that and how that's related to comms. But Sunday night, again, a totally separate operational component than comms. That's the format we're sticking with. So, guys, if nothing else, Thank you for hanging out. Please like and subscribe. See you on the next one. And with that, be safe.